Right now we're going to do weld number 4, which is the open corner joint. And in order to do an open corner joint, we're first going to need to get a piece of angle iron or maybe a piece of square tubing that we can tack our 2 pieces of metal next to. We could do this freehand. It's not too difficult to just hold this once you are used to it. But in order to make things a little bit easier, what we like to do is we'll take a spring clamp, clamp it to one side, flush it up, and take another spring clamp and kind of line up those edges. Once we get those lined up where it's nice and even, we're going to tack it together. And then once it's tacked together, we can pull it off the piece of angle iron. We have lots of these spring clamps floating around in the tool room. There is a place for them on the right side, lower shelf, first set of door. First though, before we can weld this, you can see that it's really, really rusty, one of the rustier pieces. So I'm going to take my grinder real quick and clean these up. So now that we've got our metal, I cleaned up basically right where I'm about to weld. The other thing that we need to make sure of is that we clean the edges that we're about to weld. Now I haven't done that yet, so I'm going to do that real quick. We're going to just zip down this edge straight on the face to try and make sure it's nice and clean, since that is primarily the surface that we're going to be welding. That's the type of surface finish we're looking for to get this to weld properly. Maybe on your practice ones, it's not going to be that big of a deal, but when we get into the cube, I'm going to show you how we step-by-step prep all the edges so that they can have a nice clean weld like this. The cube may seem like an easy assignment, but if we don't set it up properly, it's going to give us a little bit of a fit. That's how it should look when we have it fit up. Nice and even, inside corner is touching the opposing inside corner. Now, I'm just going to tack it together while it's in its kind of jig or a fixture. Anything to hold it in place. All right, that's what our weld looks like when it's tacked together. Okay, not much of a gap, if anything, and those inside corners are touching. Now, when I weld this particular one, it is elevated much more off the table than we are used to. And so you need to figure out a way that makes it comfortable for you to weld across it. Up to this point, we have been resting our hands on the metal and welding. Now, we might be needing to use your forearm or even your elbow and positioning it in a way to get you comfortable to weld it. I still like to weld slightly at a 45-degree angle towards me, because it's still a very clean motion for my elbow at that point to stay on task. All right. When I weld this joint, I like to use the bigger 332 filler rod, because again, just like the lap joint, I have to fill up the thickness of the metal. When I weld this, I want the bead to be somewhat of a nice smooth transition from one face over down to the other face. So a nice good dome. I don't want to see the edges of the metal anymore, and I don't want it to bulge over the edge. So that takes a little bit of practice to get to know how much is exactly the right amount of filler as you're welding. All right. As I'm welding, I'm just allowing the filler rod to touch the front of the puddle, and just ever so slightly continuing to push that puddle forward. Not trying to spend too much time on it. And there's what the open corner looks like. To be honest, it does look a little hot, but good even spacings on the ripples, and the bead is fully flush from one tangent side to the other tangent side. And that's what we're looking for. Not bad. Give it a 3. That's weld number 4, open corner joint. Really fun. This was what I used to do over and over and over again when I was working. I would practice TIG on my breaks and before and after works. And I would put this weld together a lot just to practice watching the puddle flow and trying to get a nice, smooth, even dome across to it. So it's kind of a basic, easy weld. However, this weld and sit up is critical to make your cube turn out proper. You're ready to weld.